They're Japanese. And the Japanese, like the Chinese, they write down the page. They don't write across. That symbol makes the sound ro. That makes the sound sa. That makes ki, and so on. So there are the kana symbols down there. There are the sounds they make. Now, what is the difference between that and writing a letter like that, or your way, like that? And we all know it says B. It's because we've grown up with it. But if you grow up with a system like this, you accept it. And we were actually taught this, but more about that later. So if you look at those symbols on the screen now, you will be able to interpret those three words that I've written down there. Those two, I think everybody in the room over the age of 30 will readily know. That person you might not know. So I'm going to leave it to you now and see if you can tell us who they are. What's the top one? Can you see it? Hiroshima, or Hiroshima. That's right. And once that comes into the mind, Nagasaki. Now the bottom one, may refer to him later on if time allows, was the Admiral Yamamoto who organized the raid on Pearl Harbor and was looked upon by the Japanese almost as a god until eventually he was assassinated by the Americans towards the end of the war. And he was their leader, and that's why I've chosen those names. So, having said that, how did I come about this particular knowledge? Well, as a young lad at the age of 18 or 17 and a half, I had a different opinion with my boss, who was the chief constable of Wallasey, and he was bound to win. So I served my notice with this particular group. I was working with the civil defence and volunteered to join the Navy. I went along there and they were welcoming anyone with open arms. If you could stand up and breathe, you were in. And I went to Liverpool, and having been given a medical test, I kept on saying I wanted to be a telegraphist. And there was a recruiting Marine there who said, yes, we'll make you a telegraphist. Yes, we'll make you a telegraphist. Well, a mate of mine is with us tonight who has much more experience in the Navy than I will, who was served full-time in the Navy. And he will tell you, and I'm sure anyone else will, there's no way a recruiting Marine can tell you what you're going to be. But he just conned me into it. Yes, we'll make you a telegraphist. Though they actually wrote on my form that that's what I'd volunteered for. And they sat me on a chair like this, and they had an officer on this side, a medic, and another one on the other side. And all they did, they looked down my ears. And if they could see each other, they either made you a telegraphist or an officer. Not true, I hasten to assure you, but most of them are. Well, I got into the Navy, and having done basic drill like everybody else and learning how to shoot people and trying to row a boat and tie knots and all the rest of it, I eventually got my pay book, and in it it said FN Kendrick DJX361301, Ordinary Telegraphist S. Now everybody in the Navy starts ordinary, don't they? Will. That's the bottom rung of the ladder. It's like a private in the army, ordinary. And there I was, an ordinary telegraphist, SO. It wasn't a SO. And I said, have you got an SO? No, I have. Have you got it? And some of our mates in the same class, some had got SO and some hadn't. So we said, what's with the SO? And no one was tell us. So we invented ourselves as special operators. You know, we were 18, you know what you're like at that age. And we had all sorts of romantic visions of we were going to be special operators, you see. But no one told us. And here we are, 40-odd years later, and I'm still waiting for them to tell me. They never did. What actually happened was, we went down to Brighton, and there we were taught Morse. We went into St Dunstan, the blind place. They'd all been evacuated. And we were taught Morse under ideal conditions. When I hear some of our Gs, Class B licensees, struggling with Morse on 2 meters and elsewhere, it's quite appalling, really. Some people work wonders. I know 1 or 2 people doing an excellent job on 2 meters. I listen to them. I work one of them regularly from Stockport, an excellent operator. But there are others like the blind leading the blind. I actually heard one fellow come up one night on 2 meters and say, no, Harry, this is an F, did, like that. And I thought, God, you know, how is this poor fellow going to learn Morse? We were actually taught it under school conditions, 9 till midday, an hour and a half for lunch, and then knock off at 4 o'clock. And in 6 weeks, they'd taken us from nothing up to 22 words a minute. We were taught plain text, we were taught groups, numerals, and that was it. And we had standard buzzer exercises. Did you have standard buzzer exercises? Well, every day we had a standard buzzer exercise, and they were checked to see if we were doing okay. And at the end of that time, most of us got through okay, others didn't, and they were regraded or remustered into another branch. And after short leave, we moved along the coast to, where was it? A little bit up the coast from Brighton, Eastbourne. And there they took our speed up to 26 words a minute. Then they started to teach us German and Italian procedure. And they told us we were now members of naval intelligence. And can we be quite clear in our minds what intelligence means in military terms? It simply means gathering of information. If it had to do with the other meaning of intelligence, I don't think I would have been there. But we weren't even asked if we wanted to join. We were just recruited. We had the official Secrets Act read to us, and we were told we must not divulge them at our peril and so on. And off we went, and we learned the German procedures, some of the barred continental letters, Italian, and again, standard buzzer exercises. And by this time, there were about 300 of us who'd come in from different parts of the country. And I can remember to this day being fallen in on the parade ground. And people who were being, as we say in the Navy, were being sent on draft. And they would call 20 names would go into HMS some or other, and 5 names would go into HMS some or other. Everywhere in the Navy is HMS. Even if it's made of concrete and it's 100 miles inland, it's HMS. And they were going to shore stations and listening stations all over the world. And the numbers got less and less and less until there were only 20 of us left on the parade ground. And we were told that the following ratings, and my name is amongst them, will be going to London for further training. Now, despite the brashness of an 18 or 19-year-old, inside there is a very different person. The brashness is just a cover for your feeling of inadequacy. And my immediate reaction was we'd failed our final exercises. That, to me, further training simply meant more training until we were qualified. But we went up to Wimbledon, and when we got there, we were in an old sandstone building with a high wall around it, with armed naval sentries patrolling. Now, those of us who've ever done shore patrol, well, I'm sure you have done, all you were armed with was a haft, handle that replaced the old-fashioned belaying pin, and the only guy with any arms was the petty officer. But these people were bristling with arms, and there was barbed wire all around the place. What the hell are we going into? And I remember going into this October evening and coming in, squinting out of the darkness into the bright light, and there were people walking around in German uniforms and Italian uniforms, and people dressed as Arabs and God knows what. And they were all speaking different languages to one another. I thought, God, they're spies. And they were. And we were told to have nothing to do with them, nor they with us, and we just walked straight past them. And we were introduced to a civilian, and he said, you have been selected, we are going to teach you Japanese. And we had a Glaswegian with us who had eye problems, and his eyes were like this all the time, and I said, it's you Glaswegian. And we were introduced to this civilian, and what he taught us, I'm now going to show you. What the Japanese had done was to take the International Morph as we know it, and if we hear, you can see a letter A up there in front of you, or you hear it in your ears. If you get so used to it, it becomes a reflex action. And if you hear, you can see the B up there, or you hear it and you put it in your mind. But the Japanese didn't. If they heard, they wrote that, which was kana, and it said if. If they heard, they wrote that, and it said ha. If they heard, they wrote that, and it said ne. Now, we were allowed to write the same letters that we had been taught. But we had to learn the phonetic sounds they made. So we had to write an A, but hear it in our minds as an I. We had to write a B and hear it as a ha, and so on. And so the Japanese went through the International Morse alphabet, if you wish to call it that, all the way through, allocating to them Japanese sounds. Wa, ka, yo, ta, ri, tsu, ni, na, ra, and so on. And they went right through the alphabet, right to the Z, all carrying these sounds. Now, I've already shown you how you can combine these sounds together to make names that you'd recognize. We saw Hiroshima, we saw Nagasaki, we saw Yamamoto. But they quickly ran out of letters. They hadn't enough. So they went to the international barred letters, and they allocated symbols to these. The barred A. Speed the key up a bit. Rho. B bar, which we would say as a long break, wouldn't we? It's me. C bar, sa, E bar, toe, L bar, wi, N bar, a, O bar, su,